Sauna or sauna might seem like a luxury to some, but I don't think it is, because you can go to your average gym, not average gym, you can go to some gyms locally and they will have a dry sauna. A lot have infrared, but we're going to talk about how infrared is not the same as dry sauna. Infrared pales in comparison, at least in comparison to the literature and evidence we have to support it for its benefits. If you only have access to one or that, just do it. Better than nothing. But all of this research is on dry sauna, which is heated via coals and a heater, not via infrared means. So let's go through the data on actually, before we go into the data, let's go on a little bit of a background. Sauna comes from the American Indians to banyas in Russia to saunas in Finland. It's controlled hypothermia from 75 degrees to 100 degrees Celsius. The average sauna you'll go to will sit somewhere between 75 to 82 degrees Celsius. If you go to these countries, they will be higher usually. They will have, so for an example, for people, you should be able to sit in a sauna of 80 degrees, average person, for about 10 to 15 minutes. If you're more experienced or have better conditioning, more conditioned to heat exposure, you can expect 15 to 20 plus minutes if you push it. Now, the supposed benefits range from cardiovascular to metabolic to neurological. Could they extend lifespan, mitigate disease? Let's see. Now, this is a review of dozens of studies. We've cited them if you want to click the links in the PDF. I summarized quite a bit of this from a paper that Dr. Rhonda Patrick and one of her colleagues did. They did a review on basically like a meta-analysis, but it was a bit of a different type of review on all of this. And then what I did is I went in the studies and I looked at those particular studies and summarized some of them. So we start off with something called observational evidence. A lot of this data is from observational evidence. What that means is we are taking a group of people and we are observing them over a period of time and looking at one particular change that is occurring. For example, they look at a group of people who do sauna 4 to 7 times a week, and then they look at another group that doesn't. Then they make comparisons. But then you think, aren't there a bunch of other things that can influence your health? How do we know that sauna is the thing that influenced it the most? Well, that's the tricky thing. This is where scientists do things to control for what's called covariates. Covariates are things that can influence the data in unfavorable ways. I won't go too deep into it, but basically they try and control for things like physical activity, cardiovascular fitness, socioeconomic status as potential biases. And that's what this particular study they controlled for, and they found what is commonly touted. This study in particular is very famous in the sauna people. And they found 4 to 7 times per week was associated with a 50% reduction in cardiovascular disease mortality compared to those who only used the sauna once per week, while 2 to 3 times reduced risk by 27%. Now, a problem is we don't know the absolute risk. We just know the relative risk here. So we don't know if we're moving from 1 to 0.5 or we're moving from like 20 to 10, if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, it will in the future. We'll explain it. Now, I used to tout this research very confidently for the people. What I didn't realize, I made the mistake. Here we go, starting with mistakes, that this association was mainly found in people with contraindications such as diabetes and hypertension, and not in healthy people. It's like, God damn it. I wish it wasn't true. I wish the strength of the data, at least in this famous study, was to do with healthy people. But what it does tell us is that people with contraindications, as we typically see, are more profoundly benefited by an intervention. This is understandable. They have a compromised health. They're starting from a worse baseline, so they're going to be more impacted positively by a improvement intervention, such as sauna. And they were, which is great, because at least 50% of the population is overweight to obese, approximately. Actually, yeah, it's 40 to 60% if we're combining the two groups of adults, overweight to obese in Australia, approximately. Now, in healthy people without cardiovascular disease, there was a slight reduction, but it was a big confidence interval. So what this means is it was from 3% to 37%. So 3% is really negligible. It's almost like there's no effect. 37% is like, okay, could be some signal here. So we must express caution against the interpretation that saunas are a major cardiovascular prevention. I really wish the data did apply to healthy people, but like Lane Norton famously coined, data beats my feelings or our feelings. Our feelings are unimportant compared to what evidence and data tells us. Now, there were other studies like dementia and Alzheimer's disease reductions. Actually, no, it was the same study that showed 4 to 7 times a week of sauna resulted in a 66% reduced risk of developing dementia, 65% reduced risk of developing Alzheimer's compared to once a week. Sudden cardiac death, 63% lower risk, and 22% lower risk for the 4 to 7 versus 2 to 3 times per week, compared to people who did 1 times per week. So, a positive association that is very encouraging. Now, we can't say it caused that, but we can say it's associated with that. And the burden of evidence, the summary of this is, once we go through this whole research review, see the burden of evidence with this, with sauna use, I believe is large enough to which we can appropriate that sauna is a useful tool that should be recommended, but we cannot say it caused. We cannot say it caused these changes. It's associated. Let's keep going. How is this working? How is the sauna use working? If you've heard Joe Rogan's podcast, you will hear him talk about sauna and cold. He loves using them. And I love that he promotes it because I think it's net positive. However, he mentions a lot of what's called heat shock proteins. HSPs, no, not halal snack packs. HSPs. My Australians know what that is. Heat shock proteins. These are contained within all cells and they are important for maintaining the 3-dimensional structure of the proteins, which is important for preventing protein aggregation. Think of it like a cell being retarded, like retarding its growth. So you might have heard heat shock proteins many times. Let's clarify it. It's a proposed mechanism. I think we get excited. People like Joe go, like, oh, it's heat shock proteins, anti-inflammatory. Maybe. They can stimulate the innate immune response, so that activate natural killer cells, which are important to help fight infections. That's pretty cool. So there may be a role in HSPs regulating the innate immune response, so that could have some association with sauna and heat stress, because we see that heat stress is strongly associated with heat shock proteins in participants in a 73-degree heat chamber for 30 minutes. They saw this heat shock protein increase by 49%. 73 degrees is not that hot. I mean, it sounds very, very hot, but in a sauna, it's not that hot. It's actually on the cooler side. So I'm wondering what 80, 90 degrees could do. Kevin Bass, someone who I highly recommend you all follow on Instagram, he summarized some research showing that mice who overexpressed heat shock proteins showed earlier death. Now, no, this doesn't mean that using the sauna or exposing yourself to heat will cause yourself to die earlier, but it's just like, interesting. It's very complex. Heat shock proteins may be a reason for sauna's purported benefits, or we may be overstating them. It's still being debated. It's not yet convincing. There's a really nice diagram in here, if you're watching, that shows how heat stress activates heat shock proteins, and it supposedly helps slow muscular atrophy. I looked at that study on muscular atrophy quite in depth. I think that Rhonda promoted. Unfortunately, I think it was misinterpreted. It did not show anywhere near as favorable effects as she was, or their team, and I'm just going to say her because she has a whole team of people, their team was summarizing and purporting. It had very, very, very small impacts on muscular atrophy, or if it was the atrophy one or the growth study. I can't recall precisely. But anyway, heat shock proteins, Prevents protein aggregation, which is connected to protecting against neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, cardiovascular diseases such as heart failure, cardiomyopathy, atherosclerosis. So this may be why we see the associative decreases in these diseases when we look at observational studies. Cool if it's true. But you can start to see the dots starting to connect here. Moving on now to cardiovascular health. Now, anyone who trains and exercises, should be all of you, you know what it feels like to get your heart rate nearly, about 140, 150. What's beautiful about the sauna, it can get your heart rate there. It's very uncomfortable, if you can imagine, sitting there in the heat, sweating your ass off, and you are having a cardiovascular effect similar to that of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity. Therefore, the beautiful thing is, that is not debated, we agree on, is that we can improve cardiovascular fitness through not physically moving, through sauna, through just sitting there, which is incredible. Why? Because it implies that people who have ambulatory, not diseases, but issues where maybe they lost a limb, maybe they're disabled in some way, maybe they have psychological, intellectual, brain disabilities that don't allow them to engage in physical activity easily or conveniently. Well, what if we have a budget and we get a budget from the NDIS and we help them get a sauna in their house? I would say, as long as it's not contraindicated, that could be potentially a really good idea. Because in particular, a lot of these groups of people, and I know they're minority, but they should still be talked about. I think we observe that sauna use can decrease blood pressure, increase left ventricular ejection fraction, reduce ejection time, enhance arterial compliance, improve endothelial function, and cardiac vasodilation. What the hell does that all mean? Improved heart function, improved efficiency and effectiveness of the heart, contracting, relaxing. Let's just keep it at that. In light of that evidence, we could use it for athletes. We could use it for people who are injured physically and obviously disabled as well. And we could justify it, and I wonder what Ben would think about this because of his experience in this realm, but we could use it as an adjunct for those on performance-enhancing drugs. Could it be a useful tool to have a cardioprotective effect against the detriments of PEDs? I would say, even without evidence on it, like without direct studies on it, I would say, why not try it? The benefits seem to outweigh the costs. And given an athlete on PEDs is already so physically taxed through their training, getting them to go for a run or to get on the air bike is it can be quite difficult from a compliance and fatigue management perspective. But sauna, all right, no joint stress. So you're just sitting there. That's incredible to me. I think we should be very worthy of consideration. A nice diagram here showing the improved function of long-term sauna use on vascular compliance, the endothelial, the heart valves, and the tissue around the heart being able to expand, contract, relax, and improving blood flow. Now moving on to neurogenesis. What does this mean? Neuro means brain, genesis means creation. Think of it like the formation of new brain cells. Heat stress facilitates a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This promotes the growth of new neurons, minimizes anxiety, depression, modulates brain plasticity, which implies memory formation, retention, and skill acquisition. Not just particularly motor skills. We have a beautiful diagram from Found My Fitness showing how the increase in BDNF, which can be increased by exercise, by certain nutritional interventions, and by heat stress, meditation, omega-3s, caloric deficits, increase BDNF. So this is just, heat stress is one factor that could play an important role in this signaling pathway that is implicated in a variety of disorders and diseases. What lowers BDNF is diseases in of themselves. And so we should probably be proactive. Now we'll talk about growth hormone. Hormonally, we're talking about the brain, so we got to talk about hormones. Growth hormone, there is a transient couple-hour increase in growth hormone observed after sauna use. And my guys might start to immediately think, oh man, I'm going to get jacked from sauna. I want more growth hormone. Well, hold on, champ. Hold on. Growth hormone isn't all that it's cracked up to be for muscle growth.